Hi, I'm Marcus White and this is Everyone is God. In this video I want to share some of the ideas I have about how we can lead the world and resolve some of the issues we have as a race. Now, from a very young age, as early as 3, I became obsessed with trying to understand all the problems we had and to try and find solutions to the problems. And as I got older and I approached my late teens, I had a growing desire to start leading and present these ideas to people. And in this video, I want to present one of my ideas, which is to do with a transparent banking system. Now, I do have notes on my computer, so I will refer to these every so often. Now, one of the things I have noticed is that as a race, we seem to have had similar sort of problems throughout our entire history. If we look back through any period of history, we seem to have war, crime, violence, corruption, greed, disparity in wealth. These issues seem to have occurred consistently throughout our entire history. And if you look at the present time, we're actually seeing a superpower invade another country with the threat of nuclear war. And we're also facing greater environmental problems than we've ever faced. So it seems like humanity has not really evolved at all in the sense of actually being able to solve any of the basic problems it has. And another thing I think that runs concurrently with that is our understanding of the problems and the solutions we have haven't changed either. We don't actually really have any solutions to these problems, because if we did, we would have solved them. And surely that's the only test of whether we have solutions. Solutions only really exist when they solve the problems. So whatever ideas we have about how to solve these problems, they simply aren't working. And this leads me to conclude that we must try very radical new ideas if we are to make progress and solve the issues we have. Now, one of the other things I notice is that many of the issues we have hide in our privacy. Let me give you an example. If a traffic officer for the police force is corrupt and they take bribes from members of the public who speed, this is obviously a form of corruption. Now, because that transaction between the member of public and the police officer is not visible to everybody, the police officer can repeat this and make a living out of bribery. Now, what would happen if that transaction was visible to everybody? Well, clearly the police officer would then create an audit trail for his own crime, and he would be found out very quickly, and he would no longer be able to be corrupt, and he'd probably lose his job. So I think this principle is true in many areas of our life. The issues we have, the problems we have as a race, quite often hide in our privacy, in areas where we're private about and it's not seen. And my view is that if we want to resolve the issues we have as a race, then we're going to need to sacrifice a lot of our privacy, and we're going to have to become much more transparent in everything we do, and we're going to have to be prepared to show that to people, to have it being visible to people and be accountable in a much more transparent way. Essentially what I'm saying is we all have to be prepared to prove that we're following the law at all times. So the idea I want to present in this presentation, I call it transparent banking. And there's really 3 parts to it. The first part is that there is a single world bank. So there's only one bank, and it holds all bank accounts. And by all bank accounts, I mean all private accounts, all savings accounts, all business accounts. Now, the second feature of this bank is that those bank accounts, the statements for those bank accounts, the statements you would see when you log on and you see your transactions on your statement, all of those statements are publicly viewable 24/7 in real time. So if somebody made a transaction and it shows up on their statement immediately, at that moment in time, everybody else in the world can log on and, if they wish, look at that bank account and see that transaction, all other transactions on that bank account, and all transactions on all bank accounts. So that's the second feature of transparent banking. The third feature is that we would eliminate all cash worldwide. So this means any transaction has to go through the World Bank. The transaction would essentially be some electronic form of transaction, like an online transfer or a card payment or some electronic means of transferring money. And obviously it would immediately show up on the online statement. So that's the three features of transparent banking. Now, obviously, if people were to sign up to this globally, or it could be nationally, then this would be a huge loss of privacy. But I feel that that loss of privacy would have massive benefits, huge benefits for mankind. And in fact, I feel the benefits would be so great that the loss of privacy would actually turn around into something that people actually want to do, because they would find it so beneficial. So what I want to do now is quickly run through some of the benefits I believe there would be of a transparent banking system. So the first benefit is that nearly all financial crime becomes very nearly impossible. Now, I'd like to explain what I mean by that. First of all, by financial crime, I mean crime that is committed with the purpose of gaining money. Now, not all crime falls into that category. A considerable portion of crime is committed for other reasons, such as people becoming angry and violent, or maybe crimes of jealousy between lovers, things like that. But a lot of the crime we have is financial crime. Now, if we had a transparent banking system, the criminals would have to transact money at some point. They would have to put money into their account from another account. And for example, if their crime was theft and they sold the stolen items, those transactions would all show on their account. And similarly, if they committed fraud and they gained a sum of money through fraud, there would be a fully visible audit trail for that, where the money's come from and whose account it's gone into. And the same with sort of conning people. If they con somebody out of money, they would know which account the money's come from and which account it's gone into and who owns that account. So criminals would create a full financial audit trail immediately in real time of the transactions of their crime. And this would mean that the audit trail they create would be a trail of evidence for which they could be convicted of the crime. And it would essentially, as soon as they start committing crime and transacting money, they would create their own set of evidence to convict them. So it would become nearly impossible for these people to successfully commit and profit from crime, because they would immediately be known for doing it and they would be convicted of it. So a transparent banking system would probably eliminate nearly all financial crime. And just to put this into some perspective, estimates vary, but the drug trade worldwide is somewhere around $500 billion per year. If we had transparent banking, that trade would not be able to exist. and you simply would eliminate that problem without any other means. They would be fully visible in their activities, and they would not be able to carry it out. Now, a similar logic would apply with things like bribery, corruption, backhand deals, and favourable terms that people give in business. We've already talked about the case of bribery with a police officer picking up traffic offences. Now, any form of government official who engages in bribery would no longer be able to do that. For example, any backhand deals that are going on, such as planning officers who take sums of money from development companies for the rights to build on plots of land, or oil companies paying sums of money to politicians, all of this sort of stuff, and all the sort of favourable terms where people are doing hidden deals to get something they want in business unfairly, all of that becomes transparent and essentially would become impossible. People would not be able to do this because they would be found out straight away and they would have to stop doing it. So a transparent banking system would also stop bribery, corruption and backhand deals. Now, another benefit it would bring is a levelling and balancing of pay. So, for example, within companies, and particularly larger companies, all the pay of all the members of staff, all employees, would be visible to all other employees. So there would be a natural balance within a company where people are being rewarded fairly for their work because everybody can see it, and there can't be favourable terms for some people who are taking on the same level of responsibility. They would be paid the same as somebody else taking on the same level of responsibility. So within companies, it would start to balance pay, and this would improve the culture in the company and the way it runs, because there's a feeling of honesty and equality throughout all people in that company. Now, another thing that would happen is a levelling up of pay in different professions and trades. For example, professions which are underpaid, everybody would see what rates of pay are available in that profession, and because they're lowly paid, they would be less likely to go into those professions. So this would mean that companies and the government would have to increase their pay for those type of professions which are underpaid. And at the other end of the spectrum, in professions where it's very highly paid, or you could say overpaid, everybody would see that these people are earning a lot of money in this profession. So this would attract more people to that profession, and the supply of labour would be greater, which means companies could put down their prices for pay of those professions, and the earnings in those professions would actually reduce and come into a more realistic balance with the level of responsibility. So what would happen is you'd have a levelling up and a balancing of all the different types of professions, how much responsibility people take on in those professions and how much pay they attract, and all of that would start to balance, and these gross imbalances in pay would start to level out. Now, this would have a further benefit because this would start to reduce the wealth gap that we see all around the world, the vast differences between the rich and the poor. It would start to bring all of that into a natural balance, and we would see this much more equitable pay for all people worldwide, where people are paid fairly and equally for the level of work they do. Another advantage of transparent banking is a reduction of tax evasion. Now, most people pay tax, and if that was done in an environment of transparent banking, it would be much harder to evade tax. So people would see immediately if people are evading tax. The government would see this immediately, and therefore there will be less tax evasion. This means more tax revenue for governments from people who should be paying it, and that means more governments have more resources to spend on important public services such as health, education, transport, environmental issues. There's a second saving here because the governments would have to spend less money trying to find and catch people who are committing tax evasion. So the costs of policing tax would also be less. So this is a second saving, and this means again more money for public services. The savings continue because there's a third way that governments could save money. Tax collection in itself would become more efficient in a transparent banking system. So the resources governments would have to spend on all the people who work in tax collection, that resource would decrease. You would need less people to collect the same amount of tax or more tax. So again, there's more savings and money to be spent on public services. And finally, the transparent banking system could pave the way to automatic tax collection. So if the banking system was tied in with the correct categorization of each transaction by the person making the transaction, that could then feed into a computer that could automatically calculate tax instantly in real time. And this would create huge savings because it would mean the government could now collect tax essentially without anybody, without needing to employ anybody in that sector of the public sector. So it would mean there would be massive savings in the cost of collecting tax. Again, more money for public services. Now, those savings aren't just on the side of the government and tax collection. They are also on the side of the businesses who have to submit their accounts. Now, if there was automatic tax collection, businesses would not need to employ accountants, bookkeepers and tax advisors. And I know from experience, I've run businesses for quite a number of years, and I know that for businesses, those professionals, it's quite an expense. The combined costs of paying accountants, bookkeepers and tax advisors is quite a substantial cost for most businesses around the planet. All of that would go, all of that cost base would go with automatic tax collection. Now, the question might arise, well, what happens then with all the accountants, bookkeepers and tax advisors? What do they do now? They're going to be out of work. Well, the thing is, they would then be able to do something that provides greater value to humanity. They could become doctors, they could become farmers, they could work in teaching, they could work in any other profession which provides value to people. So it actually benefits humanity because we're not putting resources into something that doesn't actually provide something of value. We're putting the resources of those people into services we really want. So there would be massive savings for businesses all over the globe. And that would mean their cost base would be lower, which means they could provide their services and products at a cheaper price to their clients, so all the world would benefit from these lower cost base in business. And then the final benefit would be a more efficient banking system. Transparent banking would run much more efficiently. The banks would have a lower cost base because they would have to employ less staff, and this would translate into lower costs for clients. So for example, transaction charges, when we exchange money, the commission on that, the interest rate we pay on loans, and the interest rates we secure when we borrow money, or save money, all of these things could be more favourable. Our banking charges overall would be less. So just to summarise then, if we had a single transparent banking system worldwide, there would be vast benefits and savings for humanity. Firstly, we would nearly eliminate all financial crime, bribery, corruption and backhand deals. Secondly, we would level up and reduce the wealth gap worldwide. Thirdly, there would be massive savings in the whole process of tax collection by the government and the preparing of accounts for the inland revenue on the part of businesses. And finally, we would have a more efficient banking system. So that is one of my ideas for how we can lead the world and solve some of the problems we have. I hope you found this interesting. Please do leave any comments if you have any. I wish you a great day. Love and light to you. Bye-bye.